Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Crafting with Confidence. I'm Joanne, a new YouTuber who would love to grow my channel that shares fun crafting ideas with others. You can help me by watching my video to the end, liking it, and subscribing so you can join me for more projects in the coming weeks. Quilting a large project like this king-size Bargello quilt I made last year can be a huge undertaking that takes up lots of space. While it's very satisfying to create, it's not exactly a portable hobby like knitting or crocheting. That's why for today's quilting project, I wanted to show you something you could take with you to a friend's house, or work on in your chair in the evenings instead of sitting at a large table. Who doesn't want a little chair time at night? So I'm going to walk you through how to make a hand-sewn star placemat, perfect for adding a homemade touch to your table around Christmas time. The first thing I did was go to my local fabric store and I bought some pre-cut diamond-shaped paper pieces that look like this. At first I thought they were rather pricey and I ought to have just cut some myself. But as I started working on my project, I decided they were worth every penny. They're firm instead of flimsy. They fit together perfectly to make amazing shapes, and they're mathematically accurate. These particular shapes are 4 3/4 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. Next, I decided on some fabric combinations. I chose some shades of teal for my first star. Then I chose some Christmas colors, red and green, for the second star I made. For the star project that I'm guiding you through in this video, I'm going to use some wintry shades of blue. This project does not require a huge amount of fabric, maybe about 1/2 yard or meter per color, so you could easily raid your stash for it. After I've pressed my fabrics, notice there's a double layer of each color. I'm then going to pin 3 diamonds onto each fabric, leaving plenty of room for a seam allowance around each shape. So here are my 2 double strips of fabric with the diamonds pinned on that I'll cut into 6 separate rectangles. And now that I have the 6 rectangles, I'm going to cut around each diamond, leaving about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This does not have to be perfect, so don't worry too much as you're cutting. You'll see why pretty soon. And here's an example of one cut diamond shape. Once I've cut out the 6 diamonds, I'm going to unpin the paper pieces and put them aside, and we'll place the 12 fabric shapes with the right sides down on the table. Then guess what? I get to put 12 paper pieces back onto the fabric, this time with no pinning required. Now it's time to patiently iron the 4 sides of each piece of fabric around each paper diamond. This is a little bit tedious and fiddly, but that's okay, it'll all be worth it. Once you've done the ironing, you could really start seeing the potential of what you could create with these little guys. And don't worry, those tails on the edges won't be seen later. I wonder which way I should arrange this star. I think I like the second version best. Now I get to move to a comfortable spot in my living room while I hand baste each of my diamonds. I usually just use white thread so that I can see it easily when I need to take it out again later. And this basting process is time consuming, but it's definitely worth the effort. And while I'm doing this, I like to remind myself that my love of hand sewing was the reason I chose to learn about English paper piecing in the first place. Here's the back of one basted diamond. Only 11 more to go. Well, that important prep work only took about 20 minutes, a nice relaxing inside activity on a beautiful winter day. After I organize the diamonds into the shape I'm trying to create, I'm then going to patiently hand stitch each of these seams. For this more detailed stitching, I'm going to use matching thread and I'll be making very small whip stitches. I'll place my first 2 diamond pieces right sides together and we'll line them up evenly along the seam I'll be sewing. The key while you're hand sewing this seam is to use really small stitches and to make sure you do not catch the paper inside. You only want to be joining the fabric. When you get to this little flap part, just tuck it under your thumb as you keep on sewing, and when you get to the end of the seam, just stitch back towards yourself a few times. After you lay it flat, you'll see a nice clean join between the 2 pieces. I shall continue on sewing together these diamonds, leaving in the paper pieces as I stitch. Now you may be wondering why anyone would use this paper piecing technique when it takes longer than regular quilting. The main reason is that you can create much more intricate shapes than you can with a sewing machine. Also, in today's busy world, we seldom feel like we get to be alone with our own thoughts enough, while your hand sewing is the perfect time for contemplation. This hand sewing also harkens back to an earlier time when people didn't have sewing machines, which I find fascinating. One of my favorite Margaret Atwood novels, published in 1996, before I became a quilter, is Alias Grace. As I was watching a CBC series a while back depicting this novel, I was interested to see all the hand stitching the main character did, creating beautiful heirloom quilts like the one you see here. This got me thinking about how these were done, and an internet search led me to English paper piecing, a hand piecing technique originating in England in the 1700s. One can create beautiful designs with this technique, whether quite simple or very elaborate. Back to our star project, here's the front, and when I flip it over, this is what the back looks like. I'm now going to use a seam ripper and a crochet hook to take out the basting and the paper pieces. First, I'll remove the basting with my seam ripper. As you can see, the stitches come out really easily. Now the basting is all gone, and you can see that the front is looking very symmetrical. My next job is to lift out all the paper pieces with a crochet hook. Now you'll understand why there are those convenient little holes in the middle of each paper piece. This is rather satisfying. My leftover paper pieces could be used again, but they are fairly rumpled, so I'll set them aside for now. Although the back of the project looked somewhat chaotic, you'll notice that the top is coming along nicely. Now I'll carefully press my project, both the right side and the wrong side. Then I need to cut off the little bits that are sticking out at the end points of the star. Here I've cut some 12-inch fabric squares for the quilt sandwich, one that's face down for the back, some batting for the middle, and a navy blue layer with my star for the top. I've also cut some long 2-inch strips for the edging at the end. Now I'll pin each diamond in the star to the top layer of my quilt sandwich so it looks like this. Then it's back to some hand sewing, making small stitches to attach the outside of the paper pieced star to the dark blue top fabric. Here I've assembled the quilt sandwich, the bottom layer, the batting, and the top layer, making sure everything is well secured with lots of pins. And now comes the hand quilting step, where I'll hand stitch outside the star shape with a lighter blue thread and around the hexagon shape with a darker blue thread. After I've completed that hand stitching, it's time to square up the edges a bit. Then I'll have a closer look at how the quilting stitches turned out, and I'm quite happy with this result. On to some pressing of my 2-inch binding strips that I've sewn together to make one long strip. Notice I'm ironing with the right side out. And on one end I've sewn a small seam to give it a finished look. It's only now when I'm working with the binding strips to edge my project that I actually need to bring out my sewing machine. Starting about halfway down one side, I've pinned the binding with a double open edge to the outside. Leaving about 2 inches unsewn at the top, I'll start stitching the 1/4 inch seam, making sure to back stitch when I'm 1/4 inch from the corner. Then I'll clip the thread and pivot to the project. To create a nice corner, I make a 45-degree fold away from myself and then fold the binding back downwards to make a straight edge so I can start sewing again 1/4 inch from the corner. When I get back to where I've started, I'll clip the binding, creating a decent sized overlap. Remove the remaining pins. And then I'll tuck the unfinished edge inside the finished one. Then I'll finish the sewing where they overlap. Now that the binding is sewn on, all I need to do is clip the corners to reduce some bulk. And then guess what? It's back to the couch to do some hand sewing. Not that I mind one bit. And here's the finished placemat, all set to help make the house look a little more festive. Thanks so much for joining me to make this star project. If you decide to make one and wish to share a picture of your results, I'd love it if you posted it in the comments section below this video. And keep having fun crafting with confidence.